What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Today is Best Served Podcast 178. We're talking school food marketing with Rainey Wikstrom of the Healthy People Project. Rainey, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Jensen, for having me.
All right. Anybody who's been following Best Served Young has heard Rainey mentioned multiple times. She is a connector of humans, an amplifier of good works and messages. And so Dan Sharp, as well as Malcolm Sneed, have been on the show, recommended and introduced to us by Rainey. So Rainey, you're old hat to all of our audience because we have been talking about you and singing your praises on Best Served Young. So the Healthy People Project, let's just talk about very, very practical, like what exactly is happening at the Healthy People Project?
Well, I got started with health and wellness really as a parent when my son went to school and was given a lot of junk food. And I got really mad about that. And someone sat with me and said, well, what do you want to accomplish? And I said, I want to help make people healthier. And so I set that mission out, learned some new ways of advocating for health in schools. You know, I had a real kind of negative voice and spin on what I started out doing and flip that into something positive. And the Healthy People Project was born out of that.
Like it, take us back then. Your background, clearly having the child there is a huge motivator. I understand that more than ever right now, having two young sons. So take us back though. What was your professional background that kind of put you in a position to kind of know how to be an advocate and make that influence have an impact?
Well, I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. My background was sales and marketing. And my son, when he was born, he was pretty allergic to everything. And so when I took him to the doctor said he's allergic to everything in the environment. And I said, hey, what about food? And he said, that's not part of the environment. And he meant like trees and you know, I thought, this is part of the environment. This has to matter. So I didn't really know that much about nutrition. I just went and looked at my grocery basket and I noticed it was full of food with ingredients that I didn't understand. So if it didn't have like 5 things I understood, I took it out of my grocery basket. And at that time, it just left me pretty much with fruits and vegetables and really simple things. And the miracle that happened was he went from being a little kid that scratched every night until he was bleeding and his skin was bleeding to being his skin completely cleared up. And he just got so much energy that it was just dramatic. And it really taught me that food is medicine. So when he went to first grade and they started giving him candy for running a mile or cookies for snack time, I was so angry. I didn't know what to do to change this. So I really came at it from a way that like food is toxic, but that is not a message that resonates with people.
You're the crazy lady in the corner yelling versus somebody that's making an impact that has an effect downstream. I hear you. Yeah,
totally. So I read a quote by Mother Teresa that said, if you invited her to an anti-war rally, she would not attend. But if you invited her to a peace rally, she would be there. So it's this idea of being for something as opposed to being against something.
And that was a sentiment. Isn't that so simple, yet we don't do that enough, huh?
Correct. The other piece that's really important if you want to be an advocate for change is I'm a woman of privilege. And it's really easy for me to talk about healthy food, but a lot of people don't have access to that. Yeah. And so it's really understanding that people are coming from different places, different economic structures, different learning about food. And I think people saw me really as like, whoa, you're telling us what kind of yogurt to buy. And, it's this expensive brand. But even me, when I was willing to tell my story about chronic disease in my family and how our family was impacted, then suddenly people could find common ground with me. And everyone has a story. If you come at people with data and statistics and facts, you cannot persuade people with that.
Yeah.
You have to tell your story. And so when I got up and said, my grandfather died before I could meet him, my father died before my son could meet him. Suddenly the audience was like, oh my gosh, this is my story too, or I see parts of that story. And suddenly I found a way to connect with people. So I think coming at advocacy with what you're for, and then secondly, you have to be willing to be vulnerable and share your story so that people can hear you. Otherwise, they're not going to take in this data and these facts and say, oh, yeah, right, obesity statistics, I'm one of them. I'm willing to change today. No. So
it's so important. You need the facts to back it up versus jamming it down people's throats. We have been consuming stories since cave paintings, before that, even whatever came before that. And so I think it's super important. We are always contextualizing our worlds and our experiences through stories and the relatability of those stories, which give you an openness. And you know, humans want to be inherently open, yet we're so guarded. And so I think telling people a story is just a simple way. And I love being for something. So good. Now you had the unlock. Now you had the mission and purpose, and you had kind of the tools to understand how to actually make an impact. Talk then now, what's happening now? What's the work that we're doing today, the Healthy People Project, that's having an impact on our school food system? Give us a little high level, and then let's dig deep on a couple topics.
So that work at my kids' school led that school into becoming an award winner, not just me, but everybody that supported me. It won a national award. But in that process, I met with the food service director, Shelly from St. Vrain, who I'm going to give a shout out to later. And she was at the time.
Throw her up there now, Shelly. We love you.
Shelly was a food service director for DPS, and I wanted to meet with her, and I wanted to say to her, hey, why can't we have whole wheat bread? I mean, this would be so simple. Here's white bread. Why can't we have whole wheat bread? I was that mom who was complaining to food service, right? So fast forward, I end up taking this kind of volunteer work passion, develop a mission statement, and I end up working in school districts. And who am I beside? I'm beside the food service director there. And not Shelly, but I'll get to that in a second. And all of a sudden, I realized they are working so hard to improve food. Yeah. They are cooking from scratch. They're roasting their own meats. They're baking their own bread. They've introduced salad bars into every cafeteria. They've gone through an entire culinary training. And one day, this mom calls up and says, my son says, the chicken is icky. And I said, would you please come and try it? So she sat with me in the cafeteria and she was like, son, this chicken is not icky. Why did you tell me it was icky? It was this beautiful piece of roasted chicken with barbecue sauce on top. And he said, no, mom, I told you it was sticky, not icky. So this mom in the cafeteria suddenly is like, well, we need to market food. I mean, why aren't you telling us parents about this great food? I didn't even know. I thought you guys were still serving the stuff that I grew up with, because that's the paradigm, right? And so then I thought to myself, oh my gosh, we need to market this great work. I'm the one who complained to Shelly, you know, back when my kids, and now what's happening? So fast forward, I go to Live Well at the time, because they were the ones leading this work with doing the culinary training and helping food service directors with the tools they needed. And I said, you need to market this, because they don't have budgets like Chipotle or, you know, Red Robin. There's no budget. So how can we help food service directors market this great work? And they came back to me later and they said, Rainey, will you help us with this project? And I was like, okay. And that's how I got started. I started to really work with food service directors and the Live Well team around the state. And when they had gone through the training and introduced salad bars and were buying farm fresh produce, I would help them identify, what are you proud of? Like, what's great in your program? And everyone has something to showcase in their program. Even if they're largely processed, they can still tell me, you know what, I got peaches from Palisade last week. That's my start. Or I'm doing sustainability and composting. That's where I'm starting. But they're all trying to do better. And so I would ask them, what are you working on? What have you accomplished? And they would give me their list. And I would say, let's let your parents know about this. So in Malcolm's case, who's been on, we wrote up kind of a, here's what's great about our program. Here's what we're doing. And Malcolm tells me the next time I talk to him, these people in the community had no idea that we were doing these things. So it's just information. Marketing is just telling people what you're doing, what's going well, and how you're trying to help their kids. And it's simple information. And you create a story with it. You tell the story about how your lunch ladies are having a hard time with the bugs in the dirt and the lettuce that they're having to wash.
Yeah,
but that's really fresh lettuce, and that makes people laugh and it makes them understand. So that's how it got started. So now Live Well's helped over 100 districts, and I've been talking to food service directors all over the state. I've developed 45 tools to help them very simply, like, I've got information, how can I package it quickly and get it out to my parents and my community? So
you mentioned Malcolm. One of the things that struck me was in Creed, he is able to do a few things like ramen. I was just blown away by the fact that they're making ramen, and there's trust and confidence in the community, right? He said something, he's like, the number one rule for his kids is don't yuck on my yum. I was like, that's perfect. That is exactly what you say to kids, right? The same emotion that chefs get when you see clean plates come back to the kitchen in a restaurant, he was evoking that same emotion when he saw empty trays coming back, right? And so the dynamic, I think, was really important. And the communication with their community, he mentioned multiple times, small community, tight-knit community.
Yeah.
And I think that is not just because of the number of people, it's because the intent and the communication is there, which forms a tight-knit community. You can have 10 people in your town and have a completely divided community, or you can have 10 million people and have that level of continuity if you have communication. So I thought it's very clear to me that he got some of that coaching from you, which I appreciate. It makes total sense now. And Malcolm just like adopted that and absolutely made his own. So I really appreciate that. So you mentioned the 45 tools. Where, how, I'm at a school, I need everything that you're talking about.
Sure.
How do I get into the system? How do I get the support that I need, the communication, the information that I need?
The simplest thing that a food service director can do today is to write down all the things they're proud of. It could even be in bullet points, and create one letter that they can multi-purpose that. They can send it out to their parents via email or e-newsletter. They can take that same information and pluck it and use it on social media. They can use that same information and put on their website. They can use that same information and send it out to their small newspaper and have them come and do a story. So all of those kind of samples are on the Live Well Colorado website under resources. So go to Live Well Colorado and look under resources, and under resources, you'll see for marketing school food.
Right.
And there's over
if you'll
45
drop that in the comments
tools.
for sure.
Okay.
We'll make sure that that's there for everybody so that they can get connected to that. Absolutely. All right.
There's nothing complicated about that. Can I just mention Shelly, because I forgot to come back to the Shelly story.
Well, there's more story. Tell us about Shelly.
Well, so Shelly was the one I complained to, which I wanted to plug, but so years later, there's an audience and Shelly's on my panel, and I'm telling this story about how I used to be the parent that complained about school food, and now I'm the parent who is promoting school food. And I look over and Shelly's on my panel and I go, wait, Shelly, you're the one I complained to because she used to be in DPS and now she's up in St. Vrain. She goes, yep, that was me, Rainey. But she's doing amazing work also. And she's up in St. Vrain, Longmont, and she has an amazing production kitchen where she brings in all this farm produce, and it's very systemized and cleaned and goes in these containers out to school, perfectly packaged. The kids know exactly what to expect. I don't mean it was individually packaged, but packaged in containers where it's all cleaned, prepped, cut, and ready to go. So back to that, I wanted to swing back to say what great work Shelly
Good, and I'm glad that you did, because I know that you're not doing the work in those, but processing of raw product to then be able to utilize in the school is a massive need. There's a big disconnect, right? There's a huge movement towards IW, individually wrapped, versus, like, I get it, like 500 pounds of peaches or carrots, like what are these small schools going to do to process that? Creating an infrastructure where that product can go to a central hub and then be processed and then pushed out to those schools. So I know that at a high level, that's something that you're really promoting. Talk about that for a second, because I think that massive unlock, massive need. We can talk about this all day, but if they can't get the food into the school with the limited budgets that they have, the limited training that they have, absolutely, and the limited resources that they have within the kitchen tools and techniques and things like that. So talk about that at a high level, because I think it's hugely important. What can we do to support that effort?
Well, it's really interesting and it's very complicated. Schools are really functioning with what they have. A lot of them have old buildings, old equipment, small spaces. And so if you say, I'm going to have this great farm product, you got to think about, as you mentioned, where am I going to receive it? Where am I going to wash it and get the dirt off it? who's trained to handle it safely? How will it be packaged? How will it be stored, refrigerated? And then how will it be distributed out to my 45 or 75 schools? So it's a very complicated systems process. But more and more schools are thinking about how to do it. And one of the things I'm encouraging schools I talk to in districts is when you build your new school, when you expand your facility, please, 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 please leave space for production and for receiving. Because even if you don't have the money and the budgets now to do it, it's something you can do later in 5 years. And there are funders that will come around and pay for equipment and things like that. I heard a really sad story yesterday of a new school that made no plan to receive food, and they have a very small kitchen. And the consequence of that is that for the next 5 years or 10 years, those kids will receive food that either needs to be cooled or heated. And that's the extent. And when you think about food that you put in an oven and warm, or put in a refrigerator and cool, oftentimes you're missing a whole variety of fresh, scratch, interesting. And so please, 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 anybody in a school, in a district, think about your space and how you're going to set up for the future, because it affects generations of kids and families if that isn't a thoughtful decision.
How do you get it? How do you get in front of that? How do you get in front of that when schools are being developed? Like, how can parents, how can other schools, how can the infrastructure, like who is out there, you Live Well, to say school that's under development, you need to be considering X, Y, and Z? Like, where and how do we create that playbook for them? Because they don't think about that until after the fact, because they don't have to feed the kids until after the fact. They're just looking at CAD drawings to create their footprint, and they're looking at how much it costs per square foot for their build out. And they're you know, and I get it. Like, that's where the money is. Like, that's where the focus is. So how do we get them to think about that before they're in a situation where they're now generationally crippled when it comes to the ability to bring food to their community?
I've thought that one of the places we really need to be having conversations is in the construction, the architectural firms that serve schools. We really need them to be impressing upon those folks. Look, let's talk about what you want to be serving here in 2 years and 5 years. Let's talk about that, because later on we can get the money. You know, oftentimes stuff drops from the sky in the form of grants or, you know, whatever. So, but they need to think in advance. I think that's one place. We need to have a few experts in the state who can provide this expertise, and they do exist. Sometimes they're tied to equipment companies, but some of them have chef backgrounds, like the Live Well team. A number of those folks there are qualified to be expert consultants on space and layout and what we need to have available to serve the kinds of meals we want kids to have. So we need that expertise available. But you really need someone who's a visionary, who will go up against the system in the district to say, I'm going to dig my feet in here and say, we are not going to cut this budget. We're not going to cut this space. Let's find someplace else, you know, so that we can have an eye towards the future. And there's a school in Pueblo that I'm working with right now. They have 1,000 kids. And that's what we're doing there, is we are really making sure that the space exists, so that there's a time when they can start receiving farm product, but there's work to be done between here and there. And they have an expert consultant who's going to be working with them and imagining what that space can look like. Once that happens, there's a whole opportunity with the farmers in the Pueblo area to start bringing in their food. And that model, I think, will be one really good model that we have in Colorado.
This is why I have conversations and ask questions, and I'm always trying to connect the dots. And now I had no idea that this was going to happen, but now Best Served Young, and Rainey, I'm counting on you, is absolutely going to have somebody in architecture and construction that specializes in schools on the show, because we need to have that conversation, because we need to find out where and how they're thinking about it, because they're thinking about their lane. And again, I get it. Like, school food it doesn't matter to them. It's not part of their purview, their day-to-day, unless their kid is going to that school, just like it motivated you, and you probably never were motivated to do that before. So I think that that's important. And then the legislation side, somebody needs to have an appetite when it comes to policy and funding to have that be a priority. I think when I think of Colorado, like, a lot of that was derailed. One of the first things that happened, because Jared Polis was focused on education, and we benefited from this. Like, kindergarten was free. it was funded, right? And so a lot of that has been put on hold. I think there has to absolutely be a conversation on the legislative side. So I'm sure that those are conversations you're having in Pueblo and other places. And those were not things that I thought we'd be talking about, you know? So I think, so we got to go, Rainey. We got work to do.
Yes.
I'm into it. All right. Marketing. You mentioned it's giving people information, giving them the story. Let's talk a little bit more about that. We need massive amounts of marketing and communication in this ecosystem. It is a black hole, Rainey. Like there is not enough conversation happening. So many people are siloed within this. There's so many people are just trying to get through the day in a scarcity mentality and a survival mentality that a lot of amazing people doing amazing works within this field don't even know each other. And I think we tell us how, Rainey, tell us how.
You are doing a great job of helping us tell that story. So first of all, thank you to you, Jensen and Sophie. You guys are amazing. As you know, Malcolm, you heard his story. So he's this golden nugget in Crete, Colorado. And I had the pleasure of talking to him on the phone and hearing about his ramen, his bones from the ranchers that he boiled and made ramen and put toppings, and the kids loved it. And so this is what I come up every day. I just got off the phone with Mary McPhee over in Garfield, and she's saving $100,000 on using these clamshells, these eco-friendly clamshells to serve food during this time when everything has to be packaged. And so I'm hearing all these great things people are doing. We've got Krista Grand in the Southwest who focuses on farm to school and has, meat from ranchers and farm produce and fruit from Palisade, and Janet in Mancos, who's right next to her doing the same thing, and they're co-oping this together. They're working together. And then over in Bayfield, we have Julie Whitmore. And we have Griselda out on the Eastern Plains just cooking from scratch and producing some of the food that our Live Well team just, raves about. It's so delicious. And so what I would love to do is I want everybody in Colorado to know all the wonderful things that have happened with school meals over the past 10 years. And the fact is, most people think of school meals as the cheese in the can that they had when they were in school. And I can't get parents to get out of this thinking. So marketing needs to happen. We need to highlight, promote, share, expand, because what this is doing is good for Colorado. It's good for our kids. We need to change the perception of school meals that exist. I also want to mention Denver Public Schools. They make their own bread, whole wheat bread. Since I met,
I had no idea.
DPS, they make their own whole wheat bread. Yes. And they're getting a multi-million-dollar greenhouse so that they can grow more food right there. They have their own farm. They have their own contract farmer. Do people know about this? No. So what I want to see is you've got Rainey doing, individual marketing, talking to people, helping folks write letters and get a little bit of information out. But we need a multi-million-dollar state campaign that raises awareness, that zooms down to Malcolm and shows what he's doing. And then we go over to Dan Sharp on the Western Slope, and we get down to the Southwest. And then we zoom up north to Daniel Brock in Greeley, who they have their own chili roaster machine there.
Come on. I mean, that's stuff that like chefs yearn for, right? This is important.
Exactly. And we zoom around the state and we get to go in and see the stories of those communities, those hardworking food service directors. And we do the marketing for them. Because like I said, they do not have the Chipotle budgets. They do not have money to tell the story, so that we can elevate the food. We can sustain the work that's been done and the investments that have been made. But ultimately, we can help these kids, because we have to make food good for everyone. And I'm going to touch on something else. And I don't know how much more time you can spend listening to me, Jensen. But
what do we got? We got 3 minutes. Let's pack as much action into that as possible.
Stigma prevents kids from eating lunch. And 1 in 6 kids in Colorado is going hungry. And as kids start to get older, they'll dabble in it. As they get older, they literally stop eating. And they stop eating for 2 reasons. There's a lot of stigma with taking school lunch. So I want lunch to be so good, everyone wants it.
Everybody.
And it should be. It's good for everyone. So we've got to reduce stigma. And the other thing I'm going to hit on is we've got to find a way to get our kids more time to eat. Because a lot of those high school kids won't eat because they know they only have 7 minutes. That's the average time kids get to eat in lunchrooms. So as we reimagine our education system and lunchrooms, let's go ahead and just reimagine time to eat while we're at it, so that it becomes a social and a special place to be, and the food is good. I've crammed a lot in there. Time to eat needs to improve. We've got to reduce stigma for these kids who are relying on food. It's got to be so good, everybody wants it. So a multi-million-dollar campaign.
Part of the show. It's perfect, Rainey. You just need to know the 47 things we need to be thinking about. Everyone's going to have to do it their own way. Their own community's going to have to figure that out. But to your point, we don't even know to ask the questions, let alone get to the answers. And so we're asking the questions and highlighting those questions and highlighting the people that are making any type of effort to be able to find the solution. These are heroes. Full stop. Heroes. If you are cultivating the future of our country, of the leaders, of the humans that will be a part of our communities, our country, you are a hero. The end. And I think it's so, so important for us to invest in that, because otherwise we're not investing in our own future. Like the kids at these schools, and the food is medicine. It will nourish their brains and their bodies. We cannot turn them into robot ones and zeros and then wonder why they aren't the productive, amazing humans that we expect to be kind of a part of the American zeitgeist of culture. Like, I think it's very, very important. So you were hammering home a lot of points. You and I got a lot more to talk about. I do want to throw a few more names up here, because I was so happy to see this name. The one and only, literally when I was like, there's something interesting happening here, and I want to connect restaurants and the food system with schools and school gardens. There was one person that I called, the very first person, Andy Nowak, who, when he was with Slow Food USA kind of full time before he started turning into a farmer in and of himself, was really instrumental in the model for school gardens and school lunch programs that you see adopted all over the country. And so Andy Nowak, absolute legend, and just such a great human, and connected me with a handful of people that connected me with a handful of people. And now we have a whole series, and I've had over 50 conversations with amazing people like yourself. So
he connected us. And you know what? We could have 5 episodes on Andy if we wanted to. So we'll have to.
Andy, you got all the acknowledgement in the world coming from us. And then these two names here, you mentioned Live Well multiple times. Yeah. Speaking with Jessica Wright, dynamo. She'll be on either on a panel, on this, on that, just co-host. I want her to co-host. Really gets it, understands the restaurant side with the chef background, understands the culinary side, and like challenged us to our thinking when we were talking about doing this channel. Said you need to be thinking about this perspective and that perspective. You know, everyone else gave us a couple little feedback notes. She wrote a novella. Like, it was amazing. And so Jessica Wright, absolutely somebody who's leading the way. The work that you get to do day in and day out with kind of Jessica and Live Well. And while we're at it, I want to throw Fernando up there as well, also with that chef background. Talk about what it means to be able to work with two
Fernando's from Oaxaca, Mexico, and I'm just waiting for him to get me on a plane and go down there and take me on a tour of food. But he's amazing trainer.
I get on that plane? I'm in.
He's also an amazing personality, and I just see him someday. He's made a series of videos on culinary training, and he is just engaging and delightful, but also deeply thoughtful about what our communities need and want and how to respond to their needs. He works closely with Jessica and our team.
I love it. So many people. Like, we could literally just have a show that was like the Oscar ceremony of just, I got to thank this person and that person and that person, that person, which is what's great. I love that there's so many people that many people don't know about. Many people like myself are now excited to be introduced to. So Rainey Wikstrom, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. You can count on me. Like, when we're talking about marketing campaigns, getting the message out there, like, that is my world. I want to be a part of that. So count me in, especially if it gets me on the plane to Oaxaca. I'm selfish. I'll take working with all of you for that as an end goal. Absolutely. I think is some important work happening. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, Sophie. I know you're behind the scenes and you do an amazing job too.
Yes, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to wrap with the audience for just a second. And I'm going to bring Sophie on too, because to your point, she's doing a lot of the amazing work. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Cheers. All right. Rainey Wikstrom doing really, really important work. The Healthy People Project. And I am such a big fan of everything that's happening within school gardens, lunch programs. There's so much work to do. And I really hope that's what's happening in this moment does not derail the efforts. There's a lot of things happening. School lunches are struggling with understanding, are they going to have a lunchroom? You mentioned the time to eat in the lunchroom. Now we're talking about in the classrooms, individually wrapped product, individually packaged product. The salad bar was a big mover for bringing fruits and vegetables into the school lunch programs to kids. School gardens have not been attended to because there's nobody that's been there working on those. So this is a big issue. And we hope that coming out of this, we recognize that there's more need than ever to localize a lot of our food systems, to invest in food within our communities. And we want to see that triple down now, even though it seems like an easy knee-jerk reaction to go the other direction. There's absolutely the need. So Best Served Young, I love this channel. Youth education, school gardens, lunch programs has become very personal to me, having two young sons now that we're navigating going back to school here coming up soon. So I appreciate that. Sophie, you want to come on for a second? I love that we got a shout out for you and your work. Yes. For everybody or anybody who does not know, when we're introducing ourselves to many, many humans doing amazing work, Sophie Breaker basically runs this entire show. She just puts things up and I say it. And good things happen. So appreciate you. Rainey's like fireball.
So thoughtful.
So good. I am really excited about the work that's happening coming out of there. When you think about your school, you're younger than us old folks here. When you think about your school lunch programs, what stands out to you?
I started packing lunch from a very early age. That's what I remember. I never ate lunch at all in high school at the lunch place. I don't think I went into our cafeteria.
Did you feel the stigma that you mentioned? Did you feel like it wasn't good enough? Did you feel like you just didn't want to mess with it? Like, why? I'm fascinated. That was really good.
Well, in elementary school, I mean, we had the little cartons of milk and you got your mac and cheese and it was great. Okay. And then in middle school, I started packing a lunch and
the food just wasn't exciting to you?
There were these egg rolls that were really great, and I remember those. But by high school, I mean, we were allowed to eat wherever we wanted to in the building, and so we just ate in the hallways and stuff. And so there was no need to go down to the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Teachers let you use their microwaves. I mean, it was great.
It crystallizes the point, though, that we want the food in school to be so good that everybody's like compelled to, that they're just like, I go to a restaurant to get this quality of food, which is, again, where I think chefs and restaurants have an opportunity to collaborate and to be a part of that, because restaurants are really good at garnering attention, being pillars of the community, putting butts in seats, as we say in the industry. And to be able to have that same dynamic within schools, I think there's an opportunity there. So we're going to talk a lot more about that. All right. Best Served Podcast 178. That was a great conversation. School food marketing, so necessary, with Rainey Wikstrom of the Healthy People Project. That is it for this show. Thank you so much. I believe, truly believe, you give a kid a vegetable, you'll change their life forever. You can change their trajectory. I believe that so wholeheartedly. So thank you so much, everyone. Great show today. Cheers.